Good morning, good evening, wherever you may be across the nation or around the world. Once again, you're listening to the VMware Communities Roundtable Podcast. This is podcast number 591. My name is Eric Nelson. With me today I have my co-host, Corey Romero. Today is Wednesday, February 9th, 2022. Corey Romero, how you doing today?
Doing well, Eric. Doing well. Sun is out in Utah, beautiful skies, and weather's starting to warm up a little bit. How about yourself?
Same thing here. It's 70 degrees. It's beautiful in California. Haven't had much rain in the beginning of since the big storms in February in December, but it is beautiful weather here, and I can say that we're actually enjoying it. It's pretty nice. On the show today, we're going to be talking about vSphere 7 update 3. So we have with us Glenn Simon. He's on with us today, so we'll hear from Glenn. We'll get to pick Glenn apart and talk about everything vSphere. I know that he has a blog out back at VMworld days. He had a blog that what was going to be coming with update 3. So we'll get to talk to him and hear his stories. But before we do that, Corey, we should talk a little bit about the news. What's happening with vExperts?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so vExperts. So we are just wrapping up our applications for the 2022 program. We're supposed to announce on the 18th, which is next Friday. I do expect that we will announce sooner based on how many applications we've got left to vote on. But the official date, and we will not run past, is the 18th, which is next Friday. So excited. Yeah.
Very cool. That should be great to see everybody get the awards. I know that because of COVID, we grandfathered a lot of people in for this year, but then there are new applications as well. So I'll thank you to all the code coaches that are not code coaches, vExpert pros that are out voting on those applications. That's fun. And speaking of applications, I was over at vexpert.vmware.com just this morning looking through. We have a new VP. That's our new marketing VP. So I was taking him through the site as well and looked at the directory, and the directory is really quite nice now, right? When you search on people, you have the profile, you have their awards, you have all the Twitter, LinkedIn links there, description of who the person is. I got to say, I haven't looked at the vExpert directory in a long time. And also you have the sorts. So you can say, show me all the vSAN members, show me all the modern apps members, and it's organized. And they're like nice, beautiful business cards with most people have their pictures. I got to say the vExpert directory is what I would call super cool and a wonderful resource. Nice job.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I know between myself and Martine Smith, we've knocked that out of the park with that. Martine's done all the coding in it. I've just done the ideas of what we should put in as far as field wise and how it should look. But yeah, between the two of us, we've done a pretty good job on it, I think.
I think we're going to have to put a link on vmware.com, a vExpert directory link right on .com, because that's such a nice resource now where the 2,500 people you can search and then contact them. It's impressive on LinkedIn. Yeah. And Twitter, LinkedIn, everybody's profile, their badges, their skills. It's a great way to learn who's who in the community ecosystem for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Neat stuff. All right. Well, with that, I don't think I have any other news. I know there is some VMworld news that's bouncing about, but I'm not allowed to talk about it yet. But I'm super excited about VMworld coming up. So again, I think Reg is going to open up sometime. Pre-Reg is going to open up sometime in April. That's the only thing that I've heard that I can actually talk about here on the show. But I am super excited about where we're going with VMworld. And so stay tuned, because I think there will be some announcements come out mid-March about, some of the stuff that's going to be happening there. So excited about that. And with that, I would say let's get into vSphere 7 update 3 and talk with Glenn. So Glenn, I don't know if you've ever been on the show before, but we always ask, because we're a community podcast, who are you? How long have you had your career? What have you done in your career? How did you end up here in this role of the program management, technical management, program management for vSphere in the cloud products business unit?
Yeah, sure. So I guess I've been in the IT industry about 25 years. Came out of college with a EE degree and promptly did not do any electrical engineering. Got into more software and actually spent most of my career in backup and recovery. So I worked for companies like Veritas, I'm sure everyone's heard of. Prior to that, a company called Seagate Software, Backup Exec, Net Backup, those products, which are pretty well known probably by the audience. And actually, as part of my tenure at Veritas, I actually was the product manager who really got us focusing on VMware. It was in the early 2000s, and all of a sudden started hearing a lot of news about this new exciting thing that was at the time just being used in test labs and just for testing purposes, but it was starting to go production, and so did a ton of research around that, talked to a lot of architects for various organizations, businesses, and IT, and made the case for us to actually kind of build something pretty revolutionary at the time, to basically protect and back up and recover VMs. And I think at the time we won Best of VMworld. That was back in 2007.
Okay.
Going back a ways.
Yeah.
And since then, decided to want to try something different after spending all my career in storage, and got into had an opportunity a couple years ago to join vSphere. And it's kind of the center of the storm, if you will, or everything revolves around vSphere, as we like to say here at VMware. So it's been quite a whirlwind in the last couple of years. But yeah, that's and my current role right now is kind of more on the marketing side, or as I like to call, chief propaganda. But it's we're essentially covering all of the different areas of vSphere, but mostly in the last, as you probably know, on the vSphere 7 side, more around the modern application modernization, our vSphere with Tanzu offering, and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a big push.
Yeah.
It's almost like you're almost like a new Bob Planker, because I know Bob has moved off into security and he does evangelizing for security stuff. And it's like, I haven't really had anybody come in that's just talk about vSphere. So that's good to have you here, right? Like,
yeah, I'd hate to be compared to Bob, but I'm sure all of the audience knows Bob. He's great. He's actually on our VMware Cloud offering now, and of course he's still maintaining his expertise in the security area.
Oh, interesting. Okay, good. I haven't had him on for a while, so it's always good to have him on too. But it's good to have you on as well. Have you been on the community podcast ever before? I don't think so, right? This is the first time here, so congratulations to that.
Thank you.
You can put this on your resume now. You can tell everybody. Well, back in 2022 in February, I actually was on the community podcast show, so that'll be good for you. So we produced we were talking about a new release of vSphere, and I know that you produced this blog, blogs.vmware.com/vSphere 2021-09. Those is the link, but you can just go to the vSphere blog at blogs.vmware.com/vSphere, and you can look around there and you can find this article. The article is announcing vSphere 7 Update 3, which was in September. So why don't you tell us a little bit about announcing in September, but here we are. I believe that the update just released maybe a week ago, right? Or went GA?
Yeah, so so we just give you a little history here. vSphere 7 was introduced at the beginning of 2020. It's almost, just in time for the pandemic. March of 2020, we introduced vSphere 7, and that was the release that introduced our Kubernetes integration. And at the time, we called it vSphere with Kubernetes. And then every 6 months, in the vSphere team, every 6 months, we like to introduce either a minor or major release. So we introduced Update 1 in the fall or September of that same year, 2020. And then in March 2021, we introduced Update 2. And then here we're in September of last year, we introduced Update 3. Now, we're not introducing an Update 4, or, and obviously I'm limited in telling everyone about futures, right? But there's not anything planned for March, so I'll just put that out there.
You can actually say that, right? Like, we're not seeing another release. and the from the announcement to the availability, right? Yeah, which is probably like 4 or 5 months here, right? Like, what is
Yeah.
that a
So
normal cycle, or did something happen that slowed us down,
well,
or what's the story?
so we have, so I just explained the updates, and
Right.
then there are actually, I guess you could call them sub updates or minor release, minor, where we have 3A, 3. There was no 3B, and I can
Right.
explain that, and then there was 3C, which just came out,
Oh, okay. So I'm missing the
just like
C.
within a week ago.
This is why
Yeah,
I was
there's a little
confused.
letter.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I'm missing the C component.
Yes,
Right.
C. So yes, the latest release is update 3C, and we can talk, and it's probably worthwhile to talk about that. But yes, we introduced update 3 in September, just before VMworld, and it was kind of funny because sometimes it's nice to introduce this stuff all at VMworld, but VMworld has become so busy with so much stuff going on that in this case we decided to get the news out a couple weeks early, going into VMworld. But and then that release we introduced, and we can talk about, if you're interested, the things we introduced in that release around a lot of AI or GPU related enhancements, some enhancements relating to persistent memory, um, and we actually integrated the NSX. Our networking solution, we actually integrated a coupling
Sure.
with the vSphere client.
Right.
So done and a bunch of other things um, with the update 3 release. And then since then, we've had, as I say, two letter releases.
Yeah.
So
You had
3,
A and
3A
B. Right.
and
Okay.
3A and 3C. It's a little confusing
Right.
because we didn't actually
Do a B.
do a B, and I can explain that and talk about that if you're interested. But essentially A was, and as you would expect, each one, the A, B, and C are kind of much smaller in
Sure.
scope.
Yeah.
It was essentially taking what we did in update 3 in the Tanzu area. So, and in just to explain, in update 3, we introduced, or I should say, enhanced the VM service to support virtual GPUs. What that means is, what the VM service, let me just explain, is essentially a service, a Kubernetes operator that allows, let's say, a developer to, using the kubectl or the Kubernetes commands, to create a VM. We've had that for a while, but we've enhanced it in update 3 to be able to provision a VM that has virtual CPUs connected to it. So that allowed you to create a virtual machine that had GPU power associated with it. And then in update 3A, we then allowed you to actually include virtual GPUs into a Tanzu Kubernetes grid cluster. All right,
Okay.
so it's
Right.
so essentially, um, with update 3A, now you have everything you need in order to power your AI apps within a Tanzu
Right,
environment,
because from
Kubernetes environment.
Tanzu, you can actually deploy a container or a pod node, whatever, that
Right. Yeah,
allows you to specify that this has got a vGPU associated with
that's
the
right.
VM.
Yeah, and it's a little confusing. That's why I'm trying to explain that
Right.
what we introduced in 3 was only virtual machines,
Right.
and then we added to that containers basically
Containers.
in
Right.
3A. So
Right.
we obviously originally didn't want to do it that way. We want to put everything together in update 3, but you know, some of the stuff slipped into A. So
Right. Right. Okay, and that makes sense. And now we didn't do a B, so now we're at
that's
C.
right.
And C is the one that just became available, which I get now.
That's
Okay,
right.
and what do we get in C?
Well, okay,
Bug
so
fixes for A, right? That's usually
that's right. Well, there
right.
was, as probably a lot of the audience, certainly those who are familiar with, who have been, using vSphere 7, and we were, unfortunately, when we went to market with update B, there were some quality issues, and it was some kind of unprecedented quality issues that we had in working with one of our partners. Essentially, there were, and I don't know the in the details of exactly what, but essentially there were some changes to driver names, and it just broke all sorts of things. Normally, we would just issue a patch, right? In this case, we had to actually remove it from the download site. which, as far as I know, we've never had to do that before. And then produce update C that essentially fixed all that, and it also forced us to make some pretty significant changes to just our overall quality process to make sure this type of scenario never happens again. And again, because we want to repair any trust issues that may have affected our customers. We um, we wanted to harden this release as much as possible, and that's why it took a little longer to get out as well. But update 3C, then really there's not any enhancements. It's really just focused on making it rock solid.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know my son works at Roku, and you're delivering these updates, right? And you get used to it, and you get comfortable with it. And but technology is always changing. You're adding technology. Some of the technology you add has new paradigms, right? And maybe your test scenario didn't really catch the paradigm because you've added new functionality, and you hope you add the right tests to test things. But then if you're not careful in the land of TV streaming players, you can brick it. You can brick a whole TV, right? You can brick a whole machine by just doing an update that then there is no way to recover other than visit the customer site and fix it for them, right? And that can get expensive when you have 100,000 customers, right, out there that have a particular, and usually you're not bricking any, like there's usually just obscure cases, right? Like you say, there's somebody's got a driver installed that we missed or didn't catch, and it turns out there's like 2,000 customers that actually have that driver. Out of the million that we have out there, there's a couple thousand, but there's enough that you just don't want to put, maybe only 20 of those customers of the 200 that have that driver actually went and got the download, right? And only 10 of them actually installed. So the numbers aren't that bad because you can actually go visit 10 customer sites and make it right, right? Mm-hmm. But then you definitely want to pull as soon as you can that release, get it out, like you're stopping it because you don't want to have to deal with the other 2,000 of the million customers that are out there. And so you pull it off, and then you go figure out what the paradigm is for how you missed what you missed, then fix it. And then, sometimes that's adding a lot of structure, right? If you're going after Kubernetes and containers and you're doing new feature sets, you might have missed something, and you have to build a whole set of test infrastructure and feature sets, possibly, or bug fixes to make that work, get it ready, and then make sure you're not doing it again. So I see that as something that most technology companies that are innovating have to deal with on occasion.
Yeah, the only difference, of course, is vSphere runs, like 80 to 90% of the virtualization, on-prem. And so there's I guess, to use the Spider-Man phrase, with great power comes great responsibility, right? We take it very seriously. And in this case, the defects only affected you during the upgrade process, but still, they were so severe that really we felt we had to take this thing completely down um, until we had it fixed. So yeah, you're right. This is the complexity is just amazing. And it just continues to become even more complex. But with that said, vSphere is the foundation of so many. There's so many workloads are running on top of it. So we have to be rock solid, and that's yeah.
Right.
So that's why.
So then this comes back to 3.1, right? Or 7.3,
Update 3.
Update 3, yeah. And saying, and I like to use .1, but it's 7.3a, which
7.3a.
is really what was the difference between 3 and 3a? Were there any new features there, or are we talking just 7.3?
There's really only one thing.
Just the one that you talked about.
Just one thing I talked about. Yeah, just one thing.
That's it, right?
I mean,
then I roll back to 7.3. It's really the one that came with a bunch of features, and brought in the container, GPU allocation. And that's it. So then we can back to your blog article, which was actually what's in the 7.3 that now everybody's probably finally going to start using because we made it rock solid, from the 7.3a scenario.
Yeah. So So let me just kind of run through that. So one area was the introduction. So we introduced the virtual machine actually the virtual machine service. Again, that's the way that developers can create a VM just using Kubernetes commands. Actually, we introduced that a little earlier than update 3, but um, with let's see, with update 3. Yeah, that's right. We added GPUs into the mix. So sorry, there's a lot of releases, so I just had to
Mhm.
get clear. So we then a developer could create a VM that had GPUs in it. Also in the whole Kubernetes Tanzu space, what we received a lot of feedback around the just the ease of use in getting a Tanzu environment up and running, particularly around networking. And so we put a lot of work around just making that as clean as possible. There were some scenarios where we were, I think, giving we tried to give the user more power and more knobs, and it just made it so much more difficult than it had to be to set it up and get it up and running. So instead, we designed it to be, make it, a lot easier, go with a bunch of defaults, and then you can go back and change those later. So, and again, that's just going to make it a lot easier to get your Kubernetes environment up and running faster and easier. So when we talk about another area was in persistent memory. So persistent memory systems, very often you need to be able to tune them a lot more and you'll need a lot of information in order to be able to do that. So memory statistics, and we made a lot easier to get those statistics and actually present them through the UI, so nice pretty graphs, and you don't have to use third-party tools to get that. And that's going to help you be able to, again, tune that performance, which is really key for those persistent memory systems. In the storage area, for example, flash arrays take advantage of NVMe storage transports, or non-volatile memory express, I believe is its official name. And up to this point, you've had to use special HBAs and special hardware, and people just want to, hey, can I just use my normal networking hardware, TCP transport? And so we added that into update 3, which in terms of performance, I don't know, if you necessarily gives you the best performance, but it's going to give you a lot of flexibility, and you're going to be able to leverage existing hardware that you already have, and so it's going to give you a lot more flexibility with those flash and SSD arrays. So, and then if we look at maybe more from a operational standpoint, probably one of the, at least to me, the cooler things we did in this release is, up to this point, if you were a user of our networking stack, the NSX, it was pretty much a separate product, a separate interface, and and there wasn't really many handoffs or integration between the two.
Okay.
And what we've done in this release is we've actually pulled that UI right into the vSphere client. So if you'll notice at the bottom, there is a within the various tabs on the left side of the vSphere client. You can select the networking NSX, and then from there you can actually install and set up NSX, and then from there you'll be able to control NSX from within the vSphere client. So,
Okay. I want to peel back a little bit on persistent memory, right? Just
oh,
because
sure,
I'm
sure.
kind of computer geek, and it's new enough for me. So I know I got cache. I know I have DRAM. I know I have SSD flash kind of devices. Persistent kind of sits somewhere between memory and SSD. So from a speed perspective, where does persistent memory? I think that it's a type of memory that you can add to the memory bus. I'm just wondering where that sits in the hierarchy of memory. And maybe you don't know, but I know it's
Thank you
something.
for that.
Yeah.
I know a little about it, and it's just a way as these really high transactional systems that have where memory is a bottleneck, or not memory, storage is a
Is a
bottleneck.
bottleneck, right? It's like
Then
sitting
they
between
can
storage and
use,
memory, right?
yeah, you can essentially run. You don't have your memory's not volatile, right? So
Right.
it's the entire application runs in memory, and so just a way of further boosting, like further boosting your performance. Like for example, SAP is a great example of in-memory application that's very often used with persistent memory, probably the most common, in fact. And uh, so in those case, you may have remembered they had introduced in-memory databases
Sure. Right.
number of years
Right.
ago, and that this is kind of the latest incarnation of that.
Right. So it's maybe it's just what it is. It's memory that's persistent. So you buy these cards that are quote persistent memory. You can stick them in there, and then if power goes off, I think maybe persistent memory survives. Right. But it's the speed of memory. Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I don't have to
yeah.
go to a
Yeah.
disk, and
Right.
which everyone
Right.
knows is much slower.
Right.
Um,
Right. Right. Yeah. So persistent memory. Okay, got it. And so we've added feature sets to that. Got that.
yeah,
I got
and
that.
yeah, mainly around just being able to tune things and be able to monitor the performance and the how the memory is behaving. Again, this gets further kind of beyond my expertise, but um, and then also we also made some improvements in the resilience as well of the PMEM or persistent memory systems as well. So.
So on the Tanzu side of the house, what's your feeling? Because you are kind of the marketing guy, right? When
Mhm.
it comes to vSphere these days, and Tanzu is a big part of that. What's your feel of customer acceptance, or at least in our ecosystem? Where do you think we are in this journey? Is it 10% of the people playing with it? Is it 30%? Is it 60%? What's your gut feel on how this is rolling out to the vSphere community?
Well, it's interesting because I think when we were first building and preparing and taking this to market, I think the sense internally was we were kind of late to market. And I think what we found is, we're kind of, I wouldn't say too early, but it definitely seems like, as everyone knows, there's an early adopter phase of the part of the market. There's the early majority and the, that sort of thing. And even though there were Kubernetes deployments out there, on-prem, they were still it's still pretty nascent, pretty early in the market. But and it a lot of people dipping toes in the water, right? The thing is, it's not something where you just set up infrastructure and then you're ready to go. You actually have to change kind of how you develop software, and so
Right.
it involves more than just a platform. Platform is a requirement, but you need to change again your development processes and how you develop software. And there's also there's two. You think of two aspects of software building software. There's kind of building new apps, right? And then modernizing your existing apps. Well, building new apps is actually kind of a simpler problem to solve because, hey, if I want to use these new modern development methods, and I can just maybe take advantage of a public cloud Kubernetes platform, right? I don't need to worry about what I've already built uh, and the things that already run my business. I just build some new apps, and it's easy. And that's where you've seen a lot of the industry, a lot of the development of new apps is in the public cloud. But the problem that really is not been solved yet by a lot of organizations is these existing apps, and that's most of them, and they run their business, right? And there's no getting away from the fact that, hey, we have these apps that are running our business, and we're using they're based on old school monolithic methods of software development, and they're hard to update quickly, and that we're just not able to keep up with the competition or build the kind of user experience that is demanded by our customers. And that's the problem that really I think it's a much thornier, much more difficult problem to solve. But I think vSphere is really as good as any solution out there because what's great about it is your existing apps are probably running on-prem on VMs, and so just by essentially flipping a switch, you can turn all that infrastructure into Kubernetes ready infrastructure, Kubernetes platform, and then you can begin the process of modernization, which does not, you don't have to just, completely refactor everything. You can decide, well, let's just focus on, let's say, the UI, right? We want to make sure the
Right.
experience is what customers expect in 2022, and and we don't need, maybe we don't need to touch a
Some
lot of the
of the
stuff
back
under the
end
hood.
stuff, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Leave those on VMs, but then let's modernize the the parts of the app that are in most need of modernization. And that's where I think vSphere is really ideally designed for that scenario, because then you can have these modern, partially modernized apps, I guess you could say, which have a mix of VMs and containers.
Yeah, that's interesting. It does. Right before the pandemic, the year before the pandemic, I went to multiple VMUG meetings and listened to people talk and present. And I did a bunch of Raspberry Pi stuff during that time period. And one of the places where we asked for modern apps, because I was in a session with modern apps, and there were 200 people in the room, and they said, like, how many people are worrying about modern apps and Kubernetes? And 200 people were in. They were like two of the 200 that actually raised their hand going, yeah, we're looking at some of this, right? Like, and it's interesting because what I thought that was odd, right? Because there was still Kubernetes, there was momentum, but I think you call out an interesting aspect, which is for projects that were kind of getting their feet wet in this modern app space, it's a greenfield new app kind of experience. And so go put it on a cloud somewhere and you don't really have to touch the existing
Shadow
data
IT.
center. Right.
Yeah.
And a lot of shadow IT that was happening for that, the 10% early adopter curve, right?
Right.
So
Exactly.
exactly right. Right. Now, as it's become more popular and you are getting development teams spun up, then you can come back and look at what you want to do with your current application base. That makes sense. And also, I've heard some that and some of this we want to pull back out of the cloud and and get rid of the shadow IT, right? And if we have infrastructure that's ready, that's interesting. That's kind of where I was questioning. Like, I wonder where we're at with regard to like how much is being built, on top of vSphere now, because people realize that it's a capable Kubernetes instance. But also, you bring up the point of, or you want to build side by side applications that are working together, old plumbing versus new GUI versus old GUI, and how you can move that whole thing forward in a million lines of invested code that you've got to run your business. So that makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think the way this has played out, the whole sort of, you could say, container approach or modern apps approach, is not only was it essentially pockets of, let's say, developers just kind of doing their own thing in the cloud, but they were also, in the early days, they were just building apps that had no state, that they were stateless. They were ephemeral is the term, right? So, for example, if I use my iPhone and I ask Siri to tell me, I don't know, whatever,
Yeah.
where
Who won the Super Bowl, right?
thank you.
Whatever,
Yeah,
right?
something like that.
Yep.
Sorry, I was drawing a blank here. Uh, Apple, actually spins up a container in the cloud, and
Sure.
that
Right.
container is that one session of
Right.
of Siri. And then when that session concludes, it gets rid of the container. It no longer needs it. That's because the app was built purely in an ephemeral way. It wasn't designed, it was designed for that one purpose, to just, hey, give you some information and then disappear. But when you think about applying this to IT, and modern,
Yeah.
typical
Enterprise
applications,
apps. Yeah.
yeah,
Right.
enterprise, that's the term I was missing. Yeah, it's different. You got to think about state. You've got to think about storage now. You got to think about all these other things. And I think that's where the limitations of the way these apps were built in the early days is dawning on people, and that's why. But yeah, it's I think it's still early days. Even though the analysts are predicting, within 5 years, I think is the term I've heard, that this will pretty much be the dominant way of building applications. Um, but so this is the time when all this
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah. Yeah.
these decisions will be made.
Yeah. It definitely, one comment there is that I know that we had the Google guys come in and do a presentation in one of the VMware code sessions back in the day when we used to have meetups in prom, where we could have real people come in and we'd have meetups, and we had the Google guys come in and talk, and it wasn't Joe Beta, but it was somebody from Google that was part of the Kubernetes team, and they came in and their use case was, yeah, we were running 200,000 containers an hour or something like that. I'm like, how did, well, it turns out, yeah, every Google search spun up a little container, did the search, and then killed itself at the end of that. And it's like, okay, there are definitely some use cases. Like if you're running Google search and you want to have, 500,000 little compute nodes and racks like they do, you can spin one up, assign a little short memory payload to it, have it run. You might as well just do this all stuff in assembler, right? Like, but that runs and then disappears. There's no state. I don't want to say the word that you said, ephemeral, or some word that
Ephemeral.
describes that,
Yeah.
right?
Transient. That's another word.
Transient. Yeah, that's right.
Transient.
That's that one I can get my head around. It's a transient payload, and then it's gone, right? And
Yeah,
where
exactly.
I try to, at the time that they're pitching this, I'm like, okay, that's great for Google, right? And
Yeah.
that's great for some amount of web traffic kind of stuff. But for this, the stuff I'm used to, which is enterprise, I'm just like, I don't know whether I couldn't even compute how that was going to work, right? So
Yeah.
now.
There's another aspect though as well, and that is organizations are trying to figure out who should run this, right? Who should be responsible for the Kubernetes platform?
Right.
And based on, I think some data that some research that Gartner's done, only about a quarter of these, at least of the ones that are actually in production, are run by IT. So another quarter is run by more of a kind of a DevOps sort of model. Another quarter is run by the developers themselves, right? So it IT, organizations are still figuring out, okay, who really should run this. And there's there's also talk about a new dedicated organization called a platform ops. It's not when I say organization, I mean I don't know if that falls within IT or within where it
Wherever.
falls within, or
Right.
but it's platform operations, right? So they would work with maybe the traditional IT ops, and then the DevOps or the developers, and they would sort of live in between. So there is talk about that, is this sort of new platform operations.
I've always pondered this whole concept of cloud, and really, cloud is just another sales model for hardware, right? Because in the end, you still need somebody that's running it, right? You need still platform ops. You do definitely, when I've moved some payload to AWS, like, great. So I saved the idea of having to buy some Dell gear, put it in a rack, and ring it up, and then put an operating system on it. Like, I saved that, but I still need an administrator who sits and manages, which workload, how many machines are applied, how they're connecting back to other apps. Like, there is this platform role that still has to be done. Amazon doesn't do it for you, right? Like, they don't know.
Well, and somebody, and somebody's got to worry about the things that nobody else likes to worry about, like, for example, security, compliance issues, availability, those types of things that everyone else just assumes happens. And so yeah, that's
Right.
where the operations comes in.
Right. So for me, the cloud is all about where Dell has to sell its hardware. Right. They have to go sell it to the hardware vendors now, right, or the cloud vendors now.
Yeah.
That's where the hardware vendor has to sell to the cloud vendor. But the reality is that the rest of the stuff on top needs to be done. And VMware certainly has a footprint in here to automate that and secure it and enable it through networking and all the work that has to be done there. So I look at it and go, it's still a day job. And so, and then having vSphere be able to be part of that role and solution, whether it's multi-cloud or whether it's on-prem. And then the stacks above that are all just the way developers want to develop, right? Like, so once you have that platform, then how do you operationalize your software engineers engaging with that platform is just the layers above, right? And, Tanzu is certainly one of those solutions, right? And
that's really the driving force behind all of this, is developers development velocity, right? That's and AI is actually a part of that as well. As there's now pretty much, as it's been said, every organization and every industry is a software company. They have to build applications, and it was the limitations of the monolithic approach to software development that really caused a lot of these developers to kind of go their own way, go up to the public cloud, and just be able to increase their velocity. So and now I think the tools are available, it's just a matter of now. I think you're kind of at this point of figuring out the process and organization side of things.
Yeah, it definitely there is. It's amazing. I mentioned that two of my kids are now software engineers. One's a hardware engineer at Roku, but the other two are at Facebook and a startup in the city. And their definition of what they have to do to write software now is part of the maintaining 24/7 on-call status for the whole stack, right? Like they take the software engineers and they say, oh, this is your weekend. So my kids have now, even though they're pure software engineers, they have on-call support weekends that they have to do because
Sure, yeah.
because of the new way that software engineering is deploying and supporting their applications that are being deployed in real time, right? So it has unleashed the ability to do way quicker development because you don't have trained models and you don't have to package it up and then deliver to customer. No, it's just all deployed, right, out into the cloud or out into platforms. But then their role is beyond just developer now, where they're touching DevOps kind of stuff that they're doing.
Right.
So it's interesting to see that transition. It's a kind of a shocking transition as a guy who used to be a software engineer to see my kids like, no, I'm on call this weekend. And I'm like, you're what? Because the roles have blurred up and down the stack. So, but it's neat that we have that, and that platform ops role will continue to mature. I have a feeling, and Tanz is part of that. So when you say, my original question was, what do you think of adoption? What do you think of Tanz's
I didn't
role?
answer that question, did I?
Not really. You want a different thing.
Well, let me not answer it a different way.
Right. Right. Exactly.
I hate to put a number on it because I haven't
it's impossible.
seen the latest.
I just wanted
my gut.
Sense.
My gut.
What is your gut? How do you think it's going?
Again, I'm in sort of my bubble, but I think we're in the 10 to 20% of organizations are like, fully embraced to this and are very far along the way. But for the rest of the industry, they're still trying to figure this thing out. Again, I'm sure they have different pockets, but again, those pockets haven't been brought together and operating as a unit from a central IT way. So that's my sense.
My next question, which I don't very often, so for audience members that have listened this far, thank you for getting this far. Global adoption. We've noticed on, like number of followers we have on Twitter and number of people that engage on our live streams and so forth, that India and Asia and APJ in general is still what I would call traditional data center operators, right? And we're getting a ton of traffic from those regions, from people that follow me on social to people that listen to podcasts to people that come download. I'm just wondering what your thoughts are from an international adoption perspective. It seems like for me, the APJ region, Asia Pacific, is much more rooted in traditional data center land and is still growing. And maybe they adopt Tanzu, but they adopt it on-prem, right? Like it seems like they're a very on-prem centric audience. Have you noticed that?
I have. This is not specific to this tech trend, but just in my overall experience, I've noticed that. When you say APJ, I'd be more specific and say, let's say Japan and let's say China and those countries are more conservative. I found that Australia actually is more, can be actually, more willing to adopt new technologies more quickly. So I would be more nuanced. But again, I don't know specifically in this case if that's the case, but yeah, it most of the early adoption I think is driven by here and probably Western Europe.
Great. So nice to come.
Although, actually, let me just a thought just occurred to me. Another, impediment, for example, compliance requirements, regulations can actually cause organizations to be more reluctant to adopt these newer technologies. So, for example, in Germany, where they have more rigorous requirements for, let's say, data. What's the term? Data, essentially data compliance,
Right.
GDPR sort of things. And I have noticed that as well can have the opposite effect on adoption. So if you're a heavily regulated industry, or you've got some pretty significant compliance restrictions, then that'll definitely impede your adoption of these newer technologies.
So we're at coming up to the top of the hour. I know we got a little bit of a late start, but vSphere 7 Update 3C available for download today, now out there?
Yes. Once we made available 3C, we put it back up on the download site. So it's now available. And, I'd encourage everyone, if you're looking at vSphere 7, obviously 7, you want to get the latest vSphere 7 Update 3C. And like I said before, we've put a ton of effort into making sure that that is as solid as possible. I mean, we not to kind of beat a dead horse here, but we are rigorous in our quality standards, for every release, but we went an extra mile here for this one. And then and then I just want to announce that our next release of vSphere will be
Yeah,
sorry.
exactly. Static in the line there, right?
But yeah,
Yeah.
we're
I'm sure we're working. As you say, the cycle continues, right? And
yes,
we are
correct.
in the SaaS delivery model as well. So it
Yes.
is good to have that there. Anything that excites you? I know for me, VMware seems to be on a roll. Our stock price is climbing. Everything. I like where Raghuram is taking us with regards to like the products and his vision. Anything that excites you for 2022?
It excites me that, I guess I can't.
No, you can't
The
say too
next
much.
release of vSphere.
Be very vague.
Yeah, you know uh, the the state of the. Are you thinking more from internally, like VMware, or from an industry standpoint?
Anything. This is just a community podcast,
Yeah,
so
I don't know. I'm very. I
what
suppose I'm
excites
not
you?
the
You can,
first.
you can talk about a book you read. You can anything, right? What excites you?
Well,
What makes you
well,
excited?
I'll try to stay within the technology sphere here,
All
but
right.
I don't know. AI is pretty amazing. What the kinds of things that are gonna, how they're going to change. Pretty much, I'm not the first person to say this. Obviously, how it's going to change everything about what we do. Even maybe not having to drive anywhere. Of course, I haven't had to drive much during the pandemic, but self-driving cars and that sort of thing. But pretty much touching everything. And I mean, I've even I've heard it described as sort of a second industrial revolution. Right, the first industrial revolution really introduced this idea that we could actually augment or even replace human labor with mechanical labor, right?
Sure.
And
Right.
that just exploded um, the overall quality of life for pretty much everyone, the entire planet, really. And now we're kind of entering a period where you can now augment human brains, right?
Yeah.
And
All kinds of stuff. Yeah. Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, and granted, people are wary about that, cautious and concerned about how it might affect people's jobs and that sort of thing. But I think the bigger trend is I tend to be more optimistic. I tend to believe that wherever technology moves in, it gives people opportunities to kind of move elsewhere in what they do. But there are periods of transition, and some people can be negatively affected by that. But regardless, I think we are living kind of at the early stages of a kind of second industrial revolution. So from a technology standpoint, that's why I mean that would be the thing that comes to mind.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm in this space, but I'm in a little bit more of a like, okay, the pandemic is winding down. Hopefully, knock on cheap plastic here. That's winding down, and that what we're going to now see is what is the new work environment, metaversey kind
yes,
of what
yeah,
is it? What is life going to look like
yeah,
once we are no longer required to do this, but now we start doing it because it's either economically beneficial or we choose to do this. Like if you've had to drive to work lately, I had stopped at a stoplight and had to wait a minute and a half, and I was ready to tear my hair out because I'm just not used to having to sit for a minute and a half for anything, right? Like I don't have to sit and wait anymore. And I drove to work, and I'm like, oh my God, I had to wait 30 minutes just to get across Palo Alto up to the campus. And I'm realizing that, I don't think I'm ever going back to work the way I used to, right? Because I've changed, and now the company's changed, and the way we work has changed, the way we podcast has changed. We used to often go to a studio. So I think there's that. Now throw in AI, metaverse, other more interesting places we can go online. And it's like, I'm waiting to see how the new world work plays out as the pandemic lifts and we start making choices based on need, want, and economics, right? Versus mandatory because we might die if we do something, right? So it'll be that.
It's interesting because I remember this, and you know we're both in Silicon Valley, and you probably remember sort of, I guess it was, what is it, early 2000s or something, there were a number of companies like Sun Micro and others who were experimenting with
Work from home.
type stuff. And then the pendulum swung the other way and said, okay, that doesn't work, let's move the other way. And now this, of course, is a forcing function. It really is not just for the Valley, but pretty much everywhere now. Is is really almost have to provide this kind of flexibility. I mean, every different companies are have more or less flexibility. VMware is actually very much we're very much we're all about the, I guess, the anywhere workforce.
Personal choice. Yep.
Yeah, and I personally, I think it's great. I think most people would say, I mean, the thing you lose is collaboration. So you want to, it's harder to collaborate remotely than say around a table. But yeah, that is an interesting
cool
trend.
That is an interesting trend. We're going to see how it plays out. And I invited Tony Foster to join us because we're near the end of the podcast. We got 3 minutes left. And what we do at the end of the podcast, because we live stream on youtube.com/vbarbecue, you can go watch us, see what we look like. I know you're probably listening to this on iTunes, but if you happen to go to the vBarbecue YouTube channel, you can give us a like and a follow and see what we look like. And I will ask Glenn, because we do vBarbecue and Tony Foster's here. We talk a little bit about barbecue because it's lunchtime here in California now. Do you have a favorite barbecue? Do you do barbecue? And if not, where do you go get barbecue, or do you not?
So I'm able to mention specific places.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Smoking Pig is my latest favorite. That's a local chain here.
Yes, the local chain I've been to. There's one down by the Quake. The soccer team.
Yes, that's the one.
There's one across from the stadium, and because my son works at Roku, I'll go down and visit him, have lunch with him at the Smoking Pig Barbecue right next to the Roku campus, which is right next to the Quakes stadium. And then there's another older school one that has the big tanks. That's one of their, not too far away, like maybe 4 miles away in San Jose, right there. Excellent. I get the burnt ends. They make burnt that are fantastic.
Yes, nice. There's a nice kind of sweet sauce there. I like the brisket, but if they're out of that, sometimes they're out of it because they only make a certain amount. It's cooked for a really long time, and then I just go with the pulled pork. So
yeah, you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
Tony Foster, it is the Super Bowl coming up. You got any plans? Did you run in the snow? What's the deal out there?
So I did not run in the snow. I was just like, okay, I've got enough other stuff going on. I'm not going to run in the snow right now. I'll get it next time. It's now 60 degrees here. And absolutely wonderful. Yes, I will be barbecuing for the Super Bowl. I'm not sure what I will be barbecuing. We'll have to touch on that next week. This week I've been playing with butters for my steak. You know how you put a dollop of butter on your steak?
Yes. Yeah.
So this week I've been doing some steaks and
trying different butter, garlic butter, any other butter?
Dijon butter, Dijon mustard butter.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. So you take the butter, soften it up, put some Dijon mustard in there, And you can do it with chives, you can do it with garlic, you can do it with all sorts of things. Mix it up, and then once you take your steak off to rest for a moment or two, when you're plating, put a dollop of that on there. Oh, it makes the steak pop.
That's nice. Yeah, people forget about butter. I did some barbecue chicken. Did just chicken on the grill for 35 minutes, flipping, and then put the barbecue sauce on it for the last 7 minutes, flipping back and forth. I put barbecue sauce, flip it, more barbecue sauce, flip it, because you got to be careful; it'll burn. But you want to caramelize it and get it crispy. Then put a last coat of wet on top of it. Put it all in the bowl. You're done to let it rest for 5 or 6 minutes, and away you go. And so I took a picture of this barbecue chicken with mashed potatoes and some broccoli, took a picture and sent it to my friend, and my friend replied back like, "How much butter do you use on your potatoes?" And I said, "Only a half a stick."
Exactly. Butter makes everything better.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with butter.
All right. All right. Well, Glenn, last thing is, are you on Twitter? I know you do blogs, the vSphere blog. If you go to the vSphere blog, you can click on him as an author. If you see Glenn Simon, it shows you all of his blogs. So I did that this morning, looked at all your blogs. You got like 5 or 6 blogs out there. So just click on him as an author. You will see the vSphere 7 Update 3 blog that he did in September, but he has like 4 or 5 other great blogs. So go check them out. Glenn, are you on Twitter? And if so, what is your Twitter handle?
Yeah, it's Glenn Simon followed by an underscore.
All right.
Because someone else named Glenn Simon beat me to it.
So it's Glenn Simon, GlenSimon,
followed by an underscore. Yes.
Right.
Yep.
FOLLOWED, followed by BYUNDERSCO. That's a really long Twitter name. Yeah. So go give Glenn a follow. Go to Twitter, give him a follow. Tony Foster, Glenn, it's good to see you guys. We will be back again next week, Wednesday. Hopefully we'll get Matt back. Matt had an emergency with a customer. They were trying to track down a GSS problem, global support problem, so he couldn't be here, but he'll be back again next week. And until then, everybody, go get some barbecue and have a great rest of your week. Glenn, thanks a lot. Tony, thanks a lot. We'll see you guys later.
Thank you.